Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. The F1 schedule is heating up. Will you go with the reliable and Max Verstappen, or take your chance with a potential surprise? Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code you see at the bottom of your screen somewhere, or head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN to get started. 19 plus, please play responsibly. Welcome to Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm your host, Tim Haraney. If you want more Nailing the Apex, you can get it wherever you get your podcasts. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. Write a review. Give us a rating on there as well. It helps us a lot. Miami Grand Prix review from my hotel room. And here to help me break it all down, from the Scuderia F1 pod, it's Mr. Mark Dailey. How are you, sir?
I'm doing, thank you, Mr. Haraney. It's I was thinking today, we're almost a third of the way through the season. How did that happen so quickly?
Oh, yeah.
I know, but I'm good. Thank you.
If you want more from Mark, you can get him on Twitter at Scuderia F1 pod. Dude, let's get into this. Okay,
yes, let's do it.
Max Verstappen comes from P9 on the grid to take P1, but before the start of all of this, he was booed during
oh, really? I missed
the introductions.
I missed that. No way, really?
Yeah. So I had grid access for the race, so got to get onto the grid, and just to get onto the grid is it's a challenge in itself. Not a lot of people get that opportunity, so I was able to get the opportunity to go on the grid, and they introduced Checo. LL Cool J did the introductions, and
nice.
they introduced Checo, and then he got a huge standing ovation. Everybody's clapping and cheering because I think a lot of Mexican fans came up for the race, and then Verstappen comes out and he just gets booed.
Wow, that's
I'm
crazy.
Just like, what?
Yeah, honestly,
come on.
Today was like a bit of a crazy day, and I literally sat down to watch this one right as the lights turned green, so I missed all the good stuff. I'm surprised to hear that, but maybe not so much, because I remember a number of years ago, covering a Canada versus Mexico soccer game here at BC Place in Vancouver, and same thing. You got a lot of expat Mexicans living in the States, so I mean, being so close to the border, tens of thousands of Mexican fans came up to cheer for El Tri, and they let you know if they don't like you. Let's put it that way. That felt more like a home game for Mexico that night rather than for Team Canada. So very much the same for Checo in Miami this weekend.
Yeah, very passionate fans for sure. What did you think of the driver introductions? I mean, the last time that they tried to do this was back in 2017, and to give those of you listening a little bit of backstory on that, Michael Buffer actually did the introductions for that, and I know the drivers and the teams didn't really like the introductions and the hoopla of the build-up and really Americanizing that side of things, and Formula One quickly did away with it because nobody wanted it. And then it came back again for this race. So first, before I get into any more info on that, what did you think of it, Dailey?
Well, when it comes to things like this, it seems like they very much want to put their own kind of twist on the whole Formula One experience. I mean, we saw that last year as well. We had the boats that aren't really boats, in the that one part of the track, that kind of marina that isn't a marina. So they're trying to make it its own thing. And I mean, wouldn't he kind of be more a natural fit to the race in Vegas? But maybe that's just my kind of thing. I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of that kind of style of thing. I mean, there's, sure, kind of make it glitzy and glamoury, kind of do that sort of stuff. But at some point, it gets a little cheesy. It gets a little bit over the top, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way I think a lot of the drivers felt too. I don't think many of them really enjoyed the pre-race introductions. A big part of it was, drivers are out of the car for well over a half an hour, and I don't think they want to be removed from the car for that long before getting back into it and then heading out to compete in a race. Plus, they're standing in the sun. They're in their overalls, so it's hot. And it was hot there today on Sunday. It was so hot here, like ridiculously hot. And I don't blame them. As a former driver, I usually like to just getting in the car and getting going because, you've got all this built up energy. You need to release it somehow. And then on top of that, it's hot and you need to get moving so you can at least try and cool down somehow. And even though racing in a car, open cockpit car is not that cool, you still get a bit of airflow at the same time. But regardless of all that, drivers didn't really care for this one that much either. I liked LL Cool J's intros. I liked the music that they had. It's kind of like this F1 theme song thing that they developed. I didn't mind it. I like that they're trying new things. I just think they took too long. It just took too long.
Yeah,
I didn't. It felt there was too much. Like you could have done something that was shorter. You know what I mean? Snappier. Get in, get out. Get me in, get me out. I want the race.
Exactly. It's kind of like Super Bowl Sunday where like pregame starts at like 7 in. By the time you get to kickoff, the pregame's been going for like 9.5 hours. It's just like, yeah, I'm a little bit done with that. I'm very much like yourself, like have something, but kind of keep it on point and kind of keep it a little bit tight before people start losing interest. But are you trying to say that was maybe the most exciting part of the whole weekend, or are you going somewhere with this?
It was like being on the grid obviously was exciting. I mean, sure. I got to interview Vin Diesel.
Cool. Was he fast and furious?
Seen it. Oh, brother, this guy was all jacked up. It was awesome.
Cool, man. That's cool.
So cool. I had one question for him. I just jammed my microphone in his face. So I'm like, Vin, who's winning today? And he's like, I just got a call from God. And he's telling me, and then he literally like blanks for a minute, and he's like, "Hold on a second, ask me the question again. I got to redo this." A towel man comes in, like towels his head down.
Oh my
to get
goodness!
rid of all the sweat.
Oh my
and
goodness!
And then I'm like, "Okay, here we go. We're gonna go again." I'm like, "Vin is gonna win the race today." Shut my mouth. He's like, "I got a call from God." He's like,
"That's amazing. That's amazing."
He's like, "And God's telling me that I can't tell you who's going to win the race."
You know what? I sure hope that
awesome.
Somehow makes it into like your bumper, your intro for Dailey the Apex. That seems like something branded especially for you, buddy.
Dude, it's posted on my Instagram. If people want to see it, it's incredible. Head on over there. The same with my TikTok. I posted it on there, but yeah, career highlight moment there for sure. Made Sports Center and all that stuff, so it was pretty cool. Got to meet Pascal Siakam. That was awesome as well. I got my picture taken with him. I was stoked.
Cool. Cool.
But outside that, getting to be on the grid was probably for me. It was a highlight of the weekend. I mean, getting like on the Thursday, interviewing all the drivers that I got to interview and sitting down doing one-on-ones and whatever, and then interviewing like Lewis Hamilton and stuff like that. Like all that was cool, but man, the grid was just...
You know what I love about
else.
being around cars is just the look of them, the smell of them. Like it's just sound. Like the sound and everything. And I just can't imagine being around 20 of the fastest cars on the planet all lined up like that. That must have been an incredible experience, man. That is really, really cool.
Yeah, if you're like a racing fan and you just, like you said, Mark, like just love race cars, being on the grid is like it's like you're in heaven or Candyland or something, man, because like you're just looking at these Formula One cars. They're just like pictures. They're like art. It's just like you're staring at art, dude, and it's up close and personal and it's real and it's alive and you're just like, holy hell, this is awesome, right?
Yeah.
There's so much energy from it too. Man, that was cool. But now, as for the race, not the coolest. It wasn't a great race at all. That's 2 races already. Actually, you know what? So far this season, I don't really think any of these races have been that good. I mean, we had some better races last year for sure. But yeah, so far the racing hasn't been the greatest. They shortened the DRS zones for this one, and I think some of that played into it, Mark. I mean, I know they're they're talking about tires and the tire dag, but I also think that the DRS zones being shortened as well. Two of them at this one got shortened by 75 meters. And then the one in Azerbaijan, obviously, on the main straightaway, it got shortened by, I believe it was 100. And some of the drivers feel
That's a lot.
That
a lot.
have played into things.
Yeah, so when you think about it,
what do you think, man? You watched the race. Like, what did you think? What was your initial impressions?
Yeah, I think that the first 10 laps or so were pretty exciting. I thought we saw some good racing, but I mean that can be said for any race, until things kind of settle down. But I mean it kind of had its moments here and there. It's just unfortunate that the way that this thing kind of like played out, like when it came to like the race lead, there was like a bit of a slow burn. I mean, you look at the way that Checo went out, and he got pole position, and then with that that sort of bizarre top 10 shootout that we had, and the fact that Charles spins out, and with like what was it, about a minute and 50 something seconds they red flag it, and then so nobody really got to throw down that last hot lap right at the end of Q3. So I mean, under any other circumstances, we don't see K-Mag starting on the outside of row 2. I mean, good for K-Mag. I mean, I'm not going to try and disrespect his effort, because I mean he did what he needed to do at the time, and then luck played out in his favor. But you have Max starting from P9, you got Checo at P1, and then everybody else kind of mixed up in between. So you knew things were going to be kind of like goofy to begin with until things kind of settled down. But it was interesting because you had Checo starting on the mediums, Max starting on the hards, and I guess all the simulations predicted that the medium was the best tire to start with. But then you look, Checo goes in at lap 20, Max extends all the way to lap 45. So, I mean, Checo, he's doing 37 laps on that set of hard tires. Then Max is only doing a dozen laps on the mediums. And, at that point, it was just not like a question of if. It was basically Max is going to have the fresher tires for the last dozen of laps. He's just going to pick the place in the moment. He doesn't even really, I'm not going to say he didn't have to work for it, but he had the luxury of just picking the ideal spot, the ideal moment, and then just taking it as it there. But, I mean, it was great, beside that happening. Fernando, another podium. I think if it wasn't for Aston Martin, specifically Fernando, I mean, at least I think he's really been a bright spot through the first couple of several races of the year, Tim.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we'll touch on Aston Martin in just a second. I want to jump back to Max for a minute there, because I felt that it was really interesting with that hard tire compound starting off for him. And we were talking before we started recording this podcast. I was telling you about the pavement, and so for those who don't know, so the pavement there is brand new. Last year's pavement got torn up because it wasn't very good. It wasn't put together very well. This pavement that they used, again, it was better than last year's, but it was put together a little bit too late. And from my understanding, it may not have been power washed. And so power washing really gets all the gunk out of it and really cleans it up. And with this track, it wasn't that clean. It was very tough to pass offline. And it was very tough if a driver had dumped a wheel offline, then it was game over for them as well. So it was a very tricky track. It was a little bit abrasive as well, and then add on top of that the temperatures. And so for Max, having to carve his way through the field from P9, really doing a nice job, simply because like those tires were overheating extremely high in this race. And I think you have to manage that. You have to find a way of managing that, because once you get stuck in the battles for positions or you're behind other cars, you're not cooling the tire enough and you're really putting it through its paces. And for Max, you have to manage that. And I think he did a good job on that end, because that wasn't easy. That was, I think, very difficult for him. And I think on Sergio's side, his story coming into this weekend, Dailey, like 6 points back of the championship, and the weekend's not going great for him, right? It just wasn't. He didn't have a good Friday. He didn't have a good FP3, and then all of a sudden he gets pole position, but that's thanks to obviously Leclerc putting it in the wall, and then also Max having a mistake and having to start P9. I think Sergio got a bit lucky in that respect. Uh, I I feel like this was a race where he could have taken the championship lead.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes, luck has a lot to play with it. I mean, you can do everything right and things just, fate works against you. I mean, you look at Max. I mean, I was talking about with Hammy earlier today, just texting back and forth. Like Lewis during the Mercedes glory years, like how often did he put a wheel wrong? He never did. Every time he needed to throw down a fast lap, he was on it all the time. And we're seeing Max Verstappen doing the same thing over the past year or two, right? I mean, he rarely puts a wheel wrong. So you see this uncharacteristic little wobble in that first, his first time out in Q3. And when that happened, I was just like, "Well, that's kind of unusual for Max, but yeah, he's going to come back. He's going to throw down an incredible, eye-wateringly fast lap. He's going to nail pole." And then when Charles went off and stuffed the car into the barrier with under 2 minutes to go, I was just like, I didn't expect to see that coming. But, again, Sergio, despite not having a great weekend till that point, somehow finds himself on pole position. But, I mean, come on, let's ask the obvious question now. Max starting in P9, did anybody think that this guy wasn't at least going to end up on the podium? Go back to Spa last year. He starts in P14. By the time he gets to the end of lap 1, he's already up in P9. I mean, I feel like this guy feels like this is almost like it's like a video game. I mean, it's incredible to watch him slice through the field. I feel sometimes like I remember watching, and sorry to ramble on here. I remember watching, and I can't remember what year it was, Malaysian Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher starts from the back of the grid. He carved his way all the way through the grid, through the running order to win that race. And I feel that Max, I mean, obviously we're not going to make those comparisons to Michael Schumacher yet. He needs like 5 more chips to catch up to Schumi. But I mean, just like Michael, it didn't matter where he started on the grid. It was just like, you just figured that he's got a shot to win a race no matter where he starts on Sunday afternoon, man. It's crazy.
Well, that's the thing with Perez, though. Like I think he had an opportunity here to really take this lead in the championship, and I think I don't want to say blew it, but at the end of the day, I mean, Max went from, what was it, P14 or P15 in Saudi Arabia to P2, I think it was. I honestly didn't think Max would have a chance at winning today's race, Sunday's race. I had a feeling like he was going to podium for sure. No issues there. But I didn't think actually, come out and win. So, at the end of the day, I think Sergio might have let one get away here. And, I was interviewing him after the race and the body language. And it was weird because, Fernando came over and I said, hey, congratulations, Fernando. And, started to talk to him about, had this being his 4th podium and just, talking good stuff. And then Max came over and I said, hey, congratulations, Max. Let's talk about this statement win. And Sergio came over and you could just see the look on his face. And I'm like, maybe don't congratulate him because he might not want you to. So it was kind of one of those where
read between the lines kind of thing.
He wasn't too happy, right? Like he may, play the team game, say the things, whatever. And yeah, he just didn't, he wasn't into it. He wasn't into the interview and he wasn't into any of the interviews. So you can just tell. I think he thinks he let one get away today.
Well, I mean, if you look at the championship after Baku, there's only 6 points between these two guys. Now they're leaving Miami. There's 14, so Max has got a little bit of daylight between him and Checo now. So you can see why he would be a little bit, upset and frustrated that he let one, like you say, get away. But it was interesting how the tire strategy worked out for them because, you hear Christian talking to Crofty and Martin Brundle during the race, and he was basically saying that all the predictions, all the models that they had said that the medium was the tire to start on. And then you heard Max at the end of the race saying, well, we actually started talking about this, flipping this thing around as early as yesterday afternoon on Saturday. So it was kind of interesting to hear those two kind of contrasting statements from Christian and from Max. I mean, obviously it worked out great for Max because I didn't think I'd see anybody get 45 laps on those hard tires, but he did, and they didn't look too horrible, all things considered with the track surface. So I mean, they really called it well. I mean, you got to give them props for that.
Another team that called it well was Aston Martin for Fernando Alonso. Like we discussed, Alonso coming home third, and it's interesting because obviously his fourth podium of the season, but outside of that, man, you know what? I think they're going to be able to get a win this year. I really do.
Oh man, I hope so. I mean, I loved it. I went back and watched the end of qualifying again yesterday because I'm not going to lie. When it comes to Fernando, over the past 20 years, I've had a love-hate relationship with Nando, and a lot of the time it's been a hate relationship. But I have to admit, when you flip that around, I mean, I love happy Fernando. Like we see that big smile on his face. He looks relaxed. He looks calm. He looks confident. He looks good in the car. I love I love the way that he kind of hammed it up a little bit with Danica after qualifying on Saturday. He's just in such a good headspace, and I mean, his worst finish this year is a P4, and the car, man, it looks good. I was just watching, riding, following in Fernando's in-car camera for a lot of the time today. I mean, the car just looks solid. I know it's still a little bit draggy compared to, say, the Red Bulls, but I mean, they got a good car there. I mean, that AMR 23 or whatever they've called it, that's a good car.
Yeah, it has a really great baseline for it, and I think that's just so positive for them to build off of. But the same thing goes for not only the baseline, but also creating a car for the future. And if you have a strong baseline, you have something great to build off of. So it's super exciting for this team. And I know some folks who are close to the situation there, and all of them say this is peak Fernando. This is just peak Fernando. This is some of the best Fernando has ever been. And, that's exciting for anyone who's either a Fernando Alonso fan or someone like myself who's just watching in on all of this and getting to experience and see what he's been able to do. I have a feeling that he could have a chance of getting an outright win sometime this season. I have a feeling they're going to be strong in Monaco. I have a feeling they're going to be strong in Spain. And then once more upgrades start to come to this car, I think they're going to start chipping away at that Red Bull lead. And the competitors still haven't brought the big upgrades yet, right? So I have to see what happens when that happens. Like Mercedes, George Russell coming in fourth, right? That is with a car that doesn't have really anything upgraded on it. And at the same time, they had a horrible weekend. It was brutal, Dailey. It was up and down. It was a roller coaster for both Russell and Hamilton. And for them to come home fourth and I believe sixth for Lewis, I mean, I don't think... Yeah, speaking with George, he was telling me, we will take this. He's like, we didn't expect it, but he's like, hey, you gotta take them when you can get them. And at the end of the day, I have a feeling they're not going to be too sad to see this car go because they have a big upgrade coming for Imola.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be any long faces in around Brackley once that car goes, or any of Mercedes fans. I mean, wow, to see Lewis only qualifying in 13th, and I'm not going to sit here and pity Lewis. I mean, considering that the amount of silverware he's had over the years, but I mean, this is Lewis. I mean, come on. I mean, this guy is not a guy that should be starting in P13. So it's frustrating from that sense. But that being said, I mean, I didn't expect to see him claw his way that far up. I thought I'd see Lewis in the points, but to get get up as high as P6. I mean, considering he was on the radio with Bono early in the race saying, I don't know if this is going to be a car that we're going to be able to bring home today. I don't know what the issue actually was, but I mean, he kept fighting, and a P4 and a P6 for Mercedes. Yeah, it's not what they're used to, and it hasn't been a great start to the season, but you take your, I wouldn't say a win, but at least a moral victory. You take those wherever you can. It's just like, we probably weren't deserving of these points, but you take them, go home, and hope that the factory delivers those upgrades pretty darn quick.
Yeah, because I think at the end of the day, when I was talking to Lewis on Saturday, and he was telling me that he's praying for rain. He's going to hope that it's going to rain, because that's the only chance that he was going to have of getting good points on Sunday. But lo and behold, man, he really pulled out a strong drive on Sunday. It was impressive to see what he was able to do with that car, because hard to pass at this track. Extremely hard. As soon as you get off line, very, very difficult. And if you're not right up on somebody coming off that back straightaway and in the DRS, there's just no chance. It's so difficult. And for Lewis and the team to work out the right strategy, but at the same time for Lewis to pounce when he needed to, very, very impressive results from both George and Lewis. And we'll scroll through just a few more, because I know we got to bounce. But Carlos Sainz, I mean, I think for Carlos and Ferrari, we can talk Ferrari as a team as a whole in a second. But for Carlos, Dailey, what did you think of his performance this weekend? Because he's coming off a pretty difficult Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and I think the confidence was he took a big hit to the confidence there.
I think so too. And again, I mean, this feels like the car itself is just like basically the same thing that we had last year. I mean, as frustrating as it is to watch, the lack of real top end, high end competitiveness with the Mercedes. I mean, Ferrari, it's just a struggle. And, I know that this is a team that Fred Vasseur really needs to wrestle and kind of really put his mark onto it. And until they can design a Frederick Vasseur backed Ferrari, I think it's going to kind of be more of the same. And I think when you're struggling with everything, I think that just, that just trickles down to everyone, and I think that's where we're seeing that kind of effect with Carlos. I just don't think he's in that optimal headspace, and I think that when there's just so many little things kind of not going right, I think that I think it's got to affect you, man. I think it really does.
Yeah, big time. And I think for Carlos, this was somewhat of a bounce back for him to just get back on pace with the car and what he can do. So confidence wise, I think it was good for him, but finishing P5 obviously is not what he wants. Same with Charles Leclerc finishing P7.
Yeah.
But again, we talked about that crash that he had on Saturday, just going over the limit a little bit too much. And then I got to talk to Jacques Claire, who's the performance engineer for Charles Leclerc, so almost like a driver coach sort of deal. But getting to sit down and talk with Jacques Claire from Ferrari on Sunday afternoon was pretty insightful. He basically said that the team doesn't want Charles to stop pushing and stop, reaching for those limits, because of there's going to be races where that one lap pace that he's able to do is going to pay off for them, and they don't want him to try and, pull himself in a bit. They want him to still be aggressive. But for the Ferrari fans out there, I don't know if you would start to question whether or not this is the team's number one driver going forward. I mean, his one lap pace, he's always so fast in qualifying, Daily. It's just sometimes in these races, he just struggles mightily or has a mistake or just something. And then this weekend, having two incidents as well,
They both seem distracted to me, those Ferrari drivers. Maybe you can add a little bit of context to that. But I mean,
Yeah.
Charles Lee, like he can't keep it on the track all weekend, and then Carlos, getting like the speeding, 5-second penalty. It just seems like there's a lack of focus there, at Ferrari, like in the cockpit. It just, I just can't quite put my thumb on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's almost like the whole team is still just trying to reorganize itself after Mattia has gone or let go, however you want to look at that. And Frederick Vasseur coming in and putting his fingerprints on the team, and what's he going to change, what's he going to leave, and all of these moving wheels and this big giant cog, and I think on top of that, they're trying to experiment with different setups on the car to try and find a balance between the race setup and the qualifying setup, because you have to remember that they don't set the car up just for qualifying. They set the car up for qualifying and race and try and find that happy medium in the middle. And so when they do that, then it gets put into park for May conditions, and you can't touch the car anymore with setup changes. And one of the things I think they're doing with this car is just trying to find where that balance is, where they can still have the one lap pace, but stop the tire degradation within the race, because the tire degradation that they're having is some of the biggest on the grid. It's got to be. I mean, the amount that car chews through tires is remarkable. They brought a new floor for this weekend, Dailey. Leclerc doesn't even feel it really works, and they're not really too sure, I think, what they're getting from it just yet. And it wasn't like an entirely new floor that they brought. There was just certain parts of it. So I'm curious to know if this is just something that they were running to get some data off of. That's what I'm curious to know.
Well, if you kind of have that feeling that, this isn't going to be our year, why don't we, try and get as much out of the car as we can, but try and get like data out of, some of the bits that we put on the car and, really apply that to next year. Because, I mean, it's obvious that the car isn't quite capable to do what they want it to do. And I mean, I think that goes in terms of setups and, what the drivers are trying to extract out of it on the track. It's so limited. It's just like it looks to be like they're pushing this car to the edge of the envelope all the time, and it's a pretty small envelope. And I think that's what we're seeing. But I mean the whole like speeding in the pit lane thing with Carlos, that's a mental lapse too, and Charles as well. It's just they remain to be a frustrating team, but I mean, at least some of the bizarre calls that we see made on the pit wall on a Sunday afternoon, those seem to have disappeared for the most part since Vasseur showed up. So I mean, there's hope there. It's just that, I think if you're hoping for a quick turnaround with the new guy coming in, I think as a fan, I think you're going to have to try and maybe temper some expectations until, like you say, he can really put his fingerprint on this team.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for Ferrari for a while, I think, to try and really claw back performance. Like I was saying, the one lap pace is great. It's just the race pace that is not great. And Sunday's where you get the points, man, and that's where you get the podiums. That's where you get the wins. Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, the glory, exactly. The two Alpine drivers coming home 8th and 9th, collecting good points for the team. That's good for Alpine. It's been a pretty horrible two races coming into this one. Australia, obviously, both of them taking each other out, and then the mishaps that happened in Azerbaijan. And yeah, good result for both drivers. Kevin Magnussen for Haas, taking the last points paying position.
Good for K-Mag, man.
Like he was on it on Saturday, dude. That guy was flying, bro. Like he was really, really good. And you know what? One of the things with K-Mag that I love is that the guy just throws it on the line all the time. He's just a racer's racer. Yeah, that's what he is. And it's great. And I love to see it. And it was a surprise to see him that high up on the grid. Talking to him on Saturday, he was telling me, he wasn't too sure how this was going to go on Sunday. He didn't think that he was going to be able to hold on to that fourth place. Sure enough, he wasn't. But still, Dailey, 10th points for Haas. It's got to be good.
It's great. I mean, compared to like Nico Hulkenberg, he comes home in P15. So I think this is a great result for Haas, great result for K-Mag. And like you say, I mean, by the time the race started and things started to sort themselves out, I don't think it's, it's too unfair to say that K-Mag was going to kind of like drop down the race order a little bit. But what I love about K-Mag is, like you say, he's a racer's racer. And this guy does not give you a single millimeter worth of space. I mean, he pushes you hard. If you're going to get your car in front of Kevin Magnussen's car, you're going to have to really, really work for it and pick like the most optimal place to do it, because he does not make that easy. He races everybody super hard, and it was fun to watch. And I thought it was really cool watching him mixing up with Charles, only to watch Max fly by on the inside and pass both of them, and then Charles end up losing out on top of that because K-Mag puts his Haas in front of the Ferrari. I thought it was good stuff, man. It was fun to watch. That was a bright moment in the race for sure.
We'll talk about Lance Stroll real quick, coming home 12th. We'll go back to Saturday. So the team put Lance on a pretty aggressive strategy. That's what Tom McCullough told me, and Mike Crack also told me that on Saturday evening. And it was probably too aggressive, where they were trying to get Lance through on one set of softs, leave two sets of softs for Q2, and leave one set of softs for Q3. And yeah, just a bit too aggressive with that strategy. He only missed out by a few tenths. But at the end of the day, that essentially what he was telling me on Sunday, what Lance was telling me, it's essentially what kind of killed his race. And he felt that if he had a few more laps towards the end, he probably would have gotten to the points, because he felt that there was quite a bit of life left in that medium tire that he was running. Just a difficult weekend for Lance. I mean, it's tough too at the moment too, simply because he's still learning the car, because he had missed so much time in it. And then on top of all of that, I mean, Fernando is operating at a really high level right now.
Yeah, I know, totally right. I mean, look at Fernando. He's got 4 P3s and a P4 so far this season. You compare that to Lance. Lance has only one top 5 finish. That came in Australia when he came P4. He had the DNF in Saudi, and then 12th today. I just want to know, like, in your conversations with Lance, is he in a good spot right now? Like, does he have any lingering after effects from that injury he had in that cycling accident right before the start of the season? Because I feel that, like, not only is Lance still learning the car, I just feel like Lance isn't there's something not firing in all cylinders. I just don't know if it's physically he's where he wants to be.
Yeah, he's starting to feel better, I think. Watching him get out of the car today, still I'm not sure how much weight bearing he can do on his wrists just yet, so I still think he's got a little bit of pain going on there, and he's just been battling through it. On top of all that, it's like I've said before, it's just missing the Bahrain test is so critical, because it puts you behind. And the reason it puts you behind is you're not learning where the limit of the car is. You're not getting those laps. Now you're in race situations where, for the most part, drivers already kind of know where the limits of the cars are, because they were able to do the testing. And you can't really experiment too much with pushing those boundaries. Like, think about it. How many laps do you think these drivers get in a weekend, Dailey?
Not that many. It's not like the 90s, like in the old days, where you could go racing on a Sunday and then go back to the factory on Monday and just jump in the car and drive all week long, right? I mean, you get whatever you get, the race distance plus qualifying plus practice. It's not a lot, is it?
And the thing with the race distance is it's different, right? You're not pushing the car to the limit. You can't take the car to the limit. You can't take it to those qualifying limits, because you know what happens? You lose the tire, you run out of fuel, and you strain the engine. So you can't do any of those things. So again, you're not pushing that boundary. So then when can you do it? Can you do it in qualifying? I mean, yeah, I guess, but then at the end of the day, what happens when you step over that limit? You're going into the wall, then you're costing the team money, and you're costing yourself track time. And then in practice, well, you're working on your race simulations, and you're using some of the push laps that you do get to sort of build that confidence up again. So it's a negative spiral, and it's one that he'll work through. And he's already starting to get closer to Fernando. I mean, in some sessions he's only a 10th off or 2/10 off, so he's already starting to come a long way. I mean, from where he was, and I'm not too concerned with Lance. I think he's fast, man. I think he's going to be fast. He's going to be able to keep up with Fernando. I want to talk about Logan Sargent because this was his home race and difficult one for him.
Yeah, because he literally
P20.
grew up 10 miles away or something, like, didn't he?
Yeah, he was sleeping in
Fort
his own
Lauderdale.
bed.
That's
man.
awesome.
He's sleeping in his
That's
own bed
amazing.
for this one. Yeah, it's pretty.
That's cool.
Yeah, pretty good, eh? Yeah, I mean, it's good on Logan. That's a tough car to drive. It really is, and I think he's doing his best job as he can as being a rookie and coming to tracks that he's never driven on or been to. I don't want to make excuses for him, but he's in a tough spot. That's a hard thing to do, and I think for Logan in this race, got a little bit of wing damage off the start, and that really affected a lot of his race. So I think for Logan, he wanted more for sure, but I think that wing damage really hurt him and hurt the team as well. But I mean, Alex Albon, dude, man, that guy, he's fast. He is fast.
Yeah,
dude.
It's funny, kind of like watching Alex, because it's like he had the chance with Red Bull that didn't really work out. It was like he was going to be the one that kind of came in and picked up the pieces after Pierre Gasly dropped the ball, and then he kind of fast forward like a year later, he had like a great half season, and then he finds himself almost the same position that Pierre was in, and then he's not in a car, and then but he made a really gutsy call, I think, to break away from the Red Bull system like that he did, to go to a team like Williams. And it was kind of a cool moment, I thought, that because I'll be honest, I don't really sit in on his comms all that often during a race, like actually never. But I thought it was a pretty cool moment. It was probably in the first 10 or 15 laps of the race where he's on the radio disagreeing with the guys back in the garage, saying that he doesn't agree with the calls and the strategy that they're making. I thought that was really cool. I was just like, I got respect for that, for you to say that, and I thought it was cool that the producers picked up on that and threw that out for public consumption.
Want to do some Twitter questions? We got one.
Sure, let's do some Twitter ones.
All right, from Taylor Ray. Any chance DeVries loses his seat mid-season?
That's a great question from Taylor Ray, because I'm kind of, yeah, man, I've been kind of wondering that myself. I was just like, Tim, I remember we sat down, we were talking about this back in the winter. We thought out of all the crop of the rookie drivers, like De Vries would be that much stronger than anyone else, because he's been racing at a pretty high level. And I'm looking, I'm like, just like, man, this is not good. And we know that Red Bull is pretty notorious, and let's face it, I mean, he's racing for AlphaTauri, but I mean, that's all part of the Red Bull family, and that's ultimately headed up by Helmut Marko, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finds himself like out at some point in the year here. Yeah,
I agree with you. It's been shocking, really, to watch. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's really hard to give him the benefit of the doubt, simply because of all of the F1 seasoning that he does actually have. Like, he's spent more times in and out. Like, we talked about this on this podcast, saying like we don't really look at him as a rookie.
No, we don't.
Because he kind of isn't. I mean, like, technically he is. And some of these tracks he hasn't really been at, but for the most part, he's been involved in Formula One. He's been doing simulator work for Mercedes. He's been like test driver, reserve driver. He had a bunch of seat time in F1 cars last season. It's like, this isn't like totally new for him. I mean,
He's not like he's
It's,
completely green like Logan or
tough
Piastri,
times.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, exactly.
pretty nasty.
Yeah. And Piastri's been impressive though. He's been good.
I agree. Yeah. He's been
pushing Lando.
Oh, definitely.
Pushing him. Brother, this has been good times. Let everybody know what you got going on and where they can find you.
Before we sign off, I thought you said Twitter questions.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was a Twitter question, but all good.
Well,
anyways, thank you for.
We got another one. I got. It was not really a question. It's like the Miami track is awful. They cannot go there again. I mean, it's not really a question. So.
That's not a question. That's a statement. Anyways, I don't want to hijack your show, but thanks, man. I appreciate it as always. You can find me on the Scootery F1 podcast with Mr. Mark Hamilton. We have 2 shows a week. You can find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify, on Twitter, all those good places, and occasionally here, having a cameo here on Nailing the Apex with Mr. Rainey. So good time as always, my friend.
Thanks, brother, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
You have been listening to Nailing the Apex. I'm Tim Haraney. If you want more from me, you can get me on social media at Tim Haraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts. Write a review. It helps us grow the pod a lot. And we'll talk to y'all later.